This is the Coming Home Podcast with John Allen.
That's like 40.
That's like 40. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the Coming Home Podcast with John Allen. I am your host, John Allen. And before I get into my conversation with today's guest, I want to remind all of my viewers and listeners that if you look in the episode description, you will then see some links that you can click on, excuse me, if you'd like to contribute and support my work that I do with the Coming Home Podcast with John Allen. And with that, hello, Lone Nikolaisen. I had to get the Norwegian pronunciation properly.
That's very close. Very, very good. But it seemed like you were a bit nervous for saying the last name.
No, I almost said Mikkelsen for some reason.
Mikkelsen.
Yeah, I almost said Mikkelsen for some reason, but it's Nikolaisen.
It's probably because I have that attitude where you think I might come after you with an axe.
Hey, I'm married to a woman from Finnmark. So axes, knives, those kind of things, I'm used to it.
You're still alive.
I'm still alive.
That's great.
No, she's a tiny little thing, but she's tough as nails. I'm missing my wife right now. She's up at our place. We have a place up on Sæland, up in Finnmark, and she's up there with the kid. Yeah, she's up there with the kids now. And unfortunately, I could not travel with them. But hey, I'm using my time wisely. Using my time wisely, knocking out good podcast episodes with good people.
That's nice.
Yeah.
But they will probably come back like a landslide at some point, right?
They're coming back, I think, next Wednesday, or was it next Thursday? Wednesday or Thursday next week they'll be back. Wednesday or Thursday next week. So it'll be good timing. You know, I always enjoy the first few days without them, you know, the solitude. But when they come home, I'm ready for them to come home. Yeah.
That's a good balance, isn't it?
I think it is. I enjoy my alone time, but I also enjoy my family. So it's a good balance. But you're all by yourself. You are way out there on the island of Røst. Yeah. And for those of you who don't know where that is, look in the description of this episode. You'll see how it's spelled. They have a letter of the alphabet that we don't have in the United States. So look at the description of the episode, everybody, and look where this island is. I want to ask you, Luna, what is it that brought you out to Røst?
Well, it's like with any independent woman, what sort of drives you somewhere is either a broken heart or that you're looking for something. And I had a combination of both.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was here visiting because I used to work as a secretary for the doctors union, the Norwegian doctors union, where I arranged like conferences and courses and stuff that they needed to specialize within medicine.
Okay.
A job of which I was in no way qualified to do, but I did it.
How'd you get that job then? How'd you get that job?
Basically nepotism.
Good old nepotism. Yes.
Yep. I knew someone who knew someone that said that I was unmensch. So there I got the job, and then
it helps.
It does. And I had like a full day of training of doing accounting. Come Christmas time, I figured there's a reason people who are accountants have more than one day of training. My office was littered with paper. Yeah. The hard way. But I'm not in prison, so I guess I did a good job of it. But
I was going to say that's kind of scary. That's kind of scary when you don't know the ins and outs, and maybe you don't know all the technical rules of it, that you can get in a little bit of trouble. You put a couple too many zeros, or you take too many zeros away, you could get in a little bit of trouble.
You could. But my biggest problem was with the accountant's job there when we were like closing the year, was because you have the sold and the bought sort of columns. That is basically accountant being an accountant. But then if you put something on the wrong side of the column, so I was looking for 23 kroners, and that is something like, I don't know, $20,
about
$2, something like,
I'm sorry, $2.
Something along
$2,
those lines. Yeah, $2. So I was looking for that because it wouldn't be a balanced sheet
It's
if I
got to be
didn't
balanced.
find where I'd posted those. So that was the hardest part. And I figure you don't go to prison for 23 kroners or $2.
No.
But I found them. But that's not the story about how I got here, though. But I was working in the job where I wasn't at all qualified. And we had one of our conferences out here on Røst. And when I was here, I just had this overwhelming feeling of wanting to live here.
Okay.
And I didn't necessarily meet a lot of people when I was here, and I was surrounded by very self-centered doctors. So that didn't necessarily give the ambiance of, wow, this is a nice place. But I still remember the place where I was out walking by myself at night in the midnight sun thinking, I want to live here. And then,
but what was it? But what was it that got you? What was it? Was it the nature? Because it is beautiful there, or was it the romantic isolation of it? What was it that kind of pulled at your heart?
I think it was maybe a little bit of both, and that it was something. It was a break. It was like a total shift where you shift where the train is heading, where it was just like a break with everything that I knew that was in the city trying to be...
Oslo?
I don't know. No, I was living in Trondheim.
Okay.
And I don't know if you had it in the States, it probably came from the States. But when I was growing up, there was this American television show about a guy that could be dropped into any sort of situation, and he would just take that job. He was like a doctor, he was an astronaut, he was a physicist, he was all bunch of stuff. And it was sort of like a spy show, and it was called The Pretender.
I do believe that's an American show, yeah.
Yeah, and it wasn't my favorite show, but when people have asked me previously, like, what have you worked with and what have you done up till now? I usually talk about that show because I say that what I've done has been more like a low budget sort of version of that show, where it's just throw me into the deep end and I'll do that. And I tried to do academia. I did my bachelor's degree, but it didn't sort of sit. And then moving here would be a break from all of that. And I would have to, in many ways, reinvent myself and try to figure out what was important to me.
That is very interesting that you say that. I was talking to a journalist earlier today, and she was asking me about what it was like when I first came to Norway, and that whole thing with having the opportunity to reinvent oneself. I spoke a little bit about that. So it's interesting that you say that. There is something with kind of just on the spur of the moment and not really having a lot of possessions. There's something about being in that situation and replanting yourself in a totally different place that I say not only is it a good opportunity to reinvent oneself, I say that if you don't reinvent yourself, the newness or the otherness of that new place can crush you. It kind of
absolutely can.
Is that kind of what you experienced to a certain degree?
Well, because like any sort of scientist that is experimenting with what they're making, like my Igor or whatever I became was the mother of my invention. And sometimes I can tell you, with this much idea and this much drive, you sometimes make really bad decisions. I wasn't supposed to be the leader of women's sort of co-op where they did things, knitted and drank coffee. But for some reason, as I was reinventing myself, these are some of the things that I tried. It was a really terrible idea, but you just have to remember that everything that is around you, of course, it has some sort of, like the wind or the waves at sea, it can push you, it can pull you, it can hold you under, but don't get too caught up in details. And I've found that it's better when you just allow yourself to make mistakes and try not to be so hard on yourself.
I agree. I think it comes down to not resisting that pushing and pulling and reshaping. Don't resist that. I believe that those things happen for a reason. You're presented. I think you're presented with a set of obstacles, a set of challenges, and then the question is do you rise to that challenge? Do you resist the challenge, or do you run from it?
Yeah.
So
also. I'm sorry, John,
go ahead,
but
please.
the amount of energy that you use trying to resist something rather than just accepting it. And I'm not like talking on the level, because there are some things that you actually have to do something about. You can't just like go in your Buddha pants through life and then your boat sinks. When your boat is sinking, you need to actually do something. But I'm thinking more on like a metaphysical sort of personal level. The resistance that you find within yourself, in addition to the resistance you find in the world, if you try to fight these things, everything becomes much harder because you use so much energy trying to overcome. At least that's what I found.
Well, yeah, and I agree with you. I try to have that Buddha-like or that Zen approach to the whole thing with the ebb and flow of the world. There's enough resistance out there. I try not to contribute more resistance. And again, that doesn't mean that I remain inactive. Quite the opposite. When I see the challenge, I'll lean into it. I'll see where that challenge will take me. And of course, once one takes up a challenge, then of course you always have free will about how you react to that challenge. But I try to be fluid in that whole thing. It's a good metaphor that you use about the waves, in the sea, the push and pull of the tide.
Yeah, but it must be. I moved to another culture than I was used to. Yeah,
because Røst is quite different from Trondheim. Trondheim is a big major city, and Røst is not. It's a big difference.
We're like 480 people, and it takes about, for the people who don't bother to go ahead and look it up, it takes about 3.5 hours by ferry that goes really fast from the mainland. So
it's really
we're really isolated and remote, and you get used to going into a different culture and a small place, but you traveled from something that us Norwegians have a lot of ideas about. And I would say that Norwegians probably have more ideas about what the US is than they do what Trondheim is.
Yes.
So you must have met a lot of different attitudes when you moved here. When was that?
I came here in 2002, the 5th of June, 2002.
Almost 20 years.
Yeah. So this is where I am. No, but it in many ways, it wasn't all that different. I grew up in quite a rural area in Ohio back home. So in many ways,
farm boy.
Yeah, I not on a farm, but in a farm area. It was quite a rural. In fact, it was called a village. It wasn't even a city. It was the village of Norton back then. That's how small it was. So in many ways, coming to Norway was kind of like coming home, because before we moved here, we lived in the Chicago suburbs, and that was not my type of thing, to be in a big city like that. So in many ways, coming to Norway wasn't really that big of a change. It was more of a change coming from my hometown to Chicago than it was coming here to Norway in that sense. So the main thing was just learning the language, and then the small nuances of the differences in the culture. But I learned the language real quick. I was speaking with people after a couple months.
Wow.
Yeah, I learned it quick. Yeah. And
that's fast.
Yeah. But I'm good with languages. I've learned quite a few up through the years. But the whole thing with it being different here, I never have thought that there are big differences. It's just small things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What I found to be different here was that, seeing as this is a place that people have more moved away from than moved to, I was sort of expecting them to have like jazz hands and everyone wanted to get to know me. And to some point that was true, that they wanted to get to know me and they were curious. Who are you? What are you going to do? Why did you come here? And all those things. But a question that I was asked that I wondered a lot about, like the first couple of years, everyone was asking, not like, where did you come from? But they asked me, when are you leaving?
Oh, wow.
So it was, so it was more like, are we willing to invest in getting to know you because you're just going to leave anyway?
But see, that is a very Norwegian thing. You want to talk about culture differences. That is a big difference right there. The reluctance to let people into your, into your world. You know.
Sphere.
Yes. Yeah. So
even if it's just for like a short time, because am I willing to make the effort and ask you about where did you actually come from? What are your interests? If you're just going to leave.
But see, I didn't.
They have abandonment issues.
I was going to say, I wonder if it has to do with, I don't know. People joke about the cold Norwegian heart. And I joke about it too, but there is something to it about how Norwegians just don't want to let people into their sphere, their circle of friends. However, there are exceptions to that because on our island, up on Seiland, now there's only 22. There's only 22 permanent residents on our side of the island, so it's an even smaller society than what you have there on Røst. But they welcomed me with open arms. That's where my wife's family is. Her father is from up there. So they've known her since she was a baby. But when they met me, they welcomed me with open arms, and I just felt like, this is going to be okay. So there's exceptions to it.
But I was welcomed. That wasn't it, and I had far too much to do and far too many people to see, really. But it was a question, and a friend of mine also moved here more or less at the same time as me, and we talked about it because she. But I got to know her once I've moved here. But we were different. We were women that moved here on our own, not knowing each other.
Okay, so you didn't know her before. You got to know her after.
No.
Okay. All right, understand.
Yeah, and she moved here to become she is a farmer, but she moved her sheep farm here. And I was sort of like aimless when I came here. I worked in the equivalent of Faulty Towers, the local hotel. And it was sort of like licking my wounds from exiting a relationship. And then I just had this crazy idea when I was out for a walk one night, like, hey, why don't I become a fisherman? So we were quite independent and quite like traveling solo when we came here. And that came with a lot of interest in what we were going to do. But she also had that, you're here, that's nice, but when are you leaving? And we found that after being here for about 2.5 years, people have stopped asking, when are you leaving?
Okay, yeah. Interesting that you chose fishing, though. How did you land on that?
Because it seemed like a life, because I got to know Fisherman, because Røst is a place that is furthest out in the Lofoten archipelago, and we're sort of like on a shelf, and around it just goes steeply down, and so you have a really short travel out to catch the fish. So this has been a fishing society for thousands of years, and that's what people do here.
So it kind of came with the territory. You were there, and
And I hadn't really met any fishermen before coming here. I just met like the, more like the caricature of a fisherman that every Norwegian knows about. Yeah. I knew about that, and I'm also from up north from before, but that wasn't part of my heritage. Before I took the security class, I'd never been aboard a fishing boat, and that's like 8 years ago.
Now, when you say you're from up north, further north than Trondheim?
Further north.
Where
from
are you?
Here.
Where are you from?
I'm from somewhere called Sortland.
Sortland, okay, and I know where that is. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's translated to Black Country.
Yeah. Maybe that's why I know where it is.
But it's not. they have this joke because there's this coastal boat that goes up and down and has a lot of tourists, and it used to be like a freight boat also, and it's called Hurtigruten.
Yeah.
So there's this sort of Norwegian when we're playing with English, where we say like the fast window went on land in black country. Yeah,
that is a good play on words. That is a direct translation of the Norwegian over to, yeah. No, that's a beautiful part of Norway. For me, all things northern Norway are better.
But you live in the south.
Yeah, I do. You see, I lost that fight. My wife wanted to. It's a long story, but my wife wanted to get back to a more of an academic environment. She's a psychiatric nurse, and there were just better opportunities down here than there were up north. So we moved back down.
Ironic, seeing as we don't have a lot of psychiatric nurses and a lot of crazy people. So you should think she should be able to make a living here.
Well, she could, but again, it was the academic level was a little bit less intense up north than it is down south. And you
also have a lot of. You don't have as much colleagues that you could talk to and discuss things with here as well.
Yeah, so she kind of was missing that, and that's a big reason why we moved down south. And it's okay. I don't like cities, and here we are living in the middle of a city. I prefer the north, but here we are living in the south. But I make the most of it. I mean, it's not a bad place. It's not a bad place to be here. It's just better up north. But we have our home up there, and we'll always have it. They're up there having their summer vacation up there now, my wife and kids, and we'll always have that. That's where I want to retire one day.
Yeah. At some point, you will sort of both have to and can. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like a light at the end of otherwise interesting tunnel.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, speaking of interesting tunnels, okay, so you want to become a fisherwoman? Fisherwoman. You want to be a fisherman?
You know what? I will not forget to get my period because you called me a fisherman, so it's quite all right.
Great answer. Fisherman. So you wanted to do that. You get started with that. You take your safety classes and whatnot. How do you go about getting a boat? Because that is not easy. That's very hard to do here in Norway.
You have to be really persistent, and also you have to nag a lot. Like, I want to come, I want to try, I want to do it, I want to become a fisherman. And then they sure laughed at me a lot. I'm pretty sure some of them laughed in my face, but not in a bad way, I guess. It's just like the northern Norwegian, you want to do that, you're going to the moon, eh? More like that. And then some of them let me ride along so that I could get a start, get a feel for it, try it.
Well, talk about that a little bit. What was that like the first time you went out? Was it more, was it worse or better than what you thought? Was it harder than you thought it would be?
Well, the first time that I actually went fishing, because I was allowed to come along when we went fishing, but I didn't really get like a function, anything to do.
Okay, so you were just along for the ride, kind of.
And I wore my boots and everything, and I was standing there ready. And I sort of like weaseled my way in so I could do a little bit so that they could see that I was interested, that I could learn. But when I was with a boat having a function, they had a full crew, so I was sort of like overflow with that. But
how many people make up a full crew?
On that boat, there were 3 people. And
how big was the boat?
That boat was maybe 15 meters, and then you go...
It's about 45 feet, roughly.
Yeah. Right around.
Yeah.
So... but they were kind of a big crew. If we had that sort of quota size today, it would probably just be 2 people working there.
Okay, yeah.
Because it's being more and more
Mechanized?
downsized with people and mechanized, not necessarily mechanized, but you want to have a bigger overhead. You want to earn more money, and then you don't have as many people working on the boats, and you get more quotas and less people working there.
How is the market now for fishermen in Norway? I guess the question
with
is
fishing
is
or
it,
quotas?
With quotas.
I'm probably not the I'm a person to ask, but we have a lot of different perspectives on that.
Okay.
The people who have quotas feel that it's quite all right that they keep increasing with like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of % in value, because that is sort of like their safety retirement fund.
Let's back up a little bit. Can you explain the Norwegian quota system? Because my American listeners or my listeners outside of Norway probably have no idea what we're talking about when we talk about quota. Can you explain the quota system?
Yeah, but the thing is, most Norwegians also don't understand about the quotas. 2 years ago, I had a woman calling me from one of our major news networks. She called me out of the blue because she'd heard my name and asked if I could explain to her the Norwegian quota system.
Okay.
And the weather was bad on that day, so we were landlocked because of, it was stormy outside. Yeah. And then I said, of course. And I think of myself as having a very rational way of explaining things. Sure. And I took that thing before that thing, and that is connected to this because of that. And then we talked for 2.5 hours, and I used one word that I'd used several times and explained that word. And I used it again, and she said, so what is that? And I go like,
what was the word? What was the word?
Strukturquota, structure quota. And that is sort of like a efficiency mechanism that they've used, because fishing in Norway hasn't always been profitable because there were far too many quotas on far too many boats, not enough fish. So what they did was that they allowed people to consolidate these quotas and pick them off one boat and put them on the next boat. Yeah. And these were supposed to be limited by time. So after a run of 25 years, once you'd consolidated a quota into your boat's quota structure, it would fall back to the government, and then they would have to redivide it. But the thing is that they have, seeing as we've moved from having a leftist to a rightist to a leftist government, they have been going back and forth with, should these rights be given into eternity, or should this be something that follows?
Because it seems like there's something unfair. I mean, okay, you have two fishermen, two quotas. Fisherman A is allowed to fish this many tons of fish. Fisherman B is allowed to fish this many. So maybe fisherman B is, I don't know, old, or maybe he's sick or something. So he gives you his quota. So now you've consolidated that quota. And then after so many years, why would that then?
I have to stop you. He wouldn't give it. He will sell it for a lot of money. And also, according to Norwegian law, you are not allowed to own a quota.
But see, and that's what I don't understand. Yeah, and that's what I don't understand, because if he has, I said gave, but if he has sold it to you then, and you have paid for it, why would it not be something that your children can inherit? Why would it go back to the government at some point?
Well, the thing is,
that's your investment. That's your investment. You bought that.
Yeah, but you also signed a piece of paper that said that this is only valid for 25 years.
But I don't read the fine print.
Yeah, but that's your problem.
That's my problem. Okay, yeah.
But the thing is that this is not going to happen, because this started, the consolidation of fishing rights started back in 2002, and we're closing in on when the window is being shut and they have to redistribute it. But the thing is, Norwegian politicians, as most Norwegians, get a real massive headache when it comes to fishing legislation, because it's really complex. And it started with them making some sort of rule and some sort of concession towards someone and something. And then they found out, oh, we didn't really look into it, so it has bad repercussions for another group. Let's try to mend it with this piece of legislation or this directive. And then it's sort of like they're out there always pissing their pants to keep themselves warm. And then you get a really complex piece of legislation that some have tried to fix or mend with making like general sweeps of now we're doing this or that. And it doesn't necessarily, it doesn't take into account society or coastal society. It doesn't take
because
into account
northern coastal society is quite different from people in Oslo aren't going to understand how people north of Trondheim live along the coast. It's a totally different way of life.
It is. And sadly, seeing as we have a democracy, which is good, they have as much say in what sort of political direction we're going to go and how that has its implications on the policy of things and how things are run. And I think it was what I would say is like the pinnacle of stupidity. Last time we had an election for parliament. They kick off their electoral campaigns, and it doesn't start anyway or anywhere as early as in the U.S. No. They sort of like they kick the election is in September, and they start kicking it off sort of like in May.
And I like it that way. I think it's so much better here. There's none of this BS and stress and money and lies that are told and commercials that you have to watch. I think it's so much better the way they do it here in Norway.
Yeah, but we have our amount of lies as well, but
sure,
they're
but
just
not
more elaborate.
Yeah, they're just
nowhere near as bad as. And also, you're not allowed to have these smear campaigns that you have.
Yeah, that's more of what I was. That's more of what I was getting at when it comes to the lies about how you lie about the other candidate in the States. They don't do that so much here. But back to this whole thing about quotas and the rights to fish.
I was just gonna if I could just finish my chain of thought.
Sure.
Our now prime minister, she's from a right-sided party, like the fiscally responsible, let's put more money into stocks, sort of privatize everything.
Good old Arne Solberg.
Oh yeah, and she was kicking off her campaign up north here. And then it was still on the table with drilling for oil outside of these really fish populous areas. And that has been a struggle for maybe 20 years now in Norway, where we tried to close Lofoten, Vesterålen, and Senja from drilling from oil. And she was then in the heart of Lofoten, in Svolvær.
Yep.
And she kicked off her speech saying that we shouldn't worry because she wouldn't obstruct our view. She wouldn't obstruct our view. And it's just like, so that's what we are to you. We're just a very scenic area.
Yeah, she got so hung up on how, putting oil rigs and stuff up there, it's not going to be ugly. It's not going to ruin the scenery and stuff. And she doesn't understand that is not the main focus. That is not the main concern of the people who live there. So talk about being detached. And that goes back to what I said about how people down south have very little knowledge. Even the politicians have very little knowledge about what the people up north are truly concerned about. It's a little ridiculous.
And also what we're contributing. Just we have a sales organization that it's not a union, but it's I don't know, maybe something that you could go to prison for in the US, some sort of like racketeering where we go together in sort of this consolidation of fishermen, and we have them working for us. They are always working for the price on the fish, for instance.
No, it's a lobbying organization. They do that in the States too. That's legal.
No, but this is not lobbying. They're like they are our lawyers when we want to talk to the fish factories that buy our fish. So they set the minimums, and we're a really strong co-op selling our fish. And it starts from Rørvik and it ends by Russia. And you have several of these further south, but they probably already killed their fish, so there's not a lot to fight about. But this year we sold, and up until this point, we've sold fish for 8 billion kroners from Rørvik to Russia. So that's like from the mid part of Norway all the way to Russia.
See, and that's what really is strange to me, because you guys are such a powerful part of the Norwegian economy, and yet you have a prime minister who goes up there and worries about obstructing the view of the coastline. You know, and and that she would not be more educated on the facts of how the people up where you live are, what you guys are concerned about, or what it means to be a fisherman, and what it takes to be a fisherman. That she wouldn't have more knowledge about this is quite amazing to me. And it's
no, but she's not alone. She's
I know,
and that is what is really, really sad.
There are people who think that the only things that matter are found within the borders of Oslo.
Yep.
You know. Or maybe as far north as Trondheim, but after that, that doesn't really mean too much. And this stuff is near and dear to my heart. You know, I live here in Drammen, but my heart is up in Finnmark. That is where, that's where my connection is. That's where, So I see the way things are down here, and I see some of the preconceived ideas that people have about what it means to live up north, or what it means to be Samisk. And things like that. And they have these preconceived notions about it, and it's just, they couldn't be further from the truth. And it's almost embarrassing that me as a foreigner has more knowledge about those things than they do. You know,
that is because
I care.
But that is because and also because you're curious.
Absolutely.
And I think that is sort of like a sea change with people when you come to the point where you understand the fact that, of course, you can have preconceptions about something, but that doesn't necessarily make it so.
Right.
And
exactly.
you need to be, and as a foreigner, you're by default more curious because you don't have these preconceptions.
Right.
Therefore, you ask questions that they wouldn't ever think to ask.
You know, that's a good point.
So it's a blessing.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. I'm very much interested in all things Norwegian, and especially things up north. That's a big reason why your story sounded so interesting to me, because you are a potential beacon of information.
Wow.
No, but you are. First of all, a lot of people, when they think fisherman, they think man, right?
Yeah, they do.
And when a lot of people think fisherman, they don't even think fisherman. They just think of the fish that they see in the store. They don't put their thoughts into that curious mode where they wonder, what is it like to be a fisherman? What does it take to be a fisherman? What are the challenges?
And also, where does this come from? And also to connect the dots that everything we eat, whether it be chickpeas or avocados or lamb or fish, everything that we eat and put into our mouth comes with a cost.
Yes.
For something and someone. And of course, there follows this sort of detachment from whatever you're cooking when you just meet whatever you're cooking in some sort of like saran wrap, nice and like a neon lighted supermarket.
I'm interested in the backstory. I'm interested in how that got here. Yeah.
It's hard to make the jump from, okay, so it came into this saran wrap. I hear there is plastic in the ocean, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't fished out like this. But it is very far from the consumer. And one part of me is really excited that people are thinking more about where does my food come from.
Yeah.
And I see that especially when I go down south and visit friends in and around our capital, where Western society is more or less have moved away from having religion be our like moral compass, where we put ourselves up or down in the hierarchy of things with morality because we are a Christian or we're a good Muslim or whatever. In secular society, I would say that has now been changed with what you eat and where it comes from. And there you have a lot of moral superiority with what is okay to eat and not. And what is sad, even though they mean well, is that a lot of the people who are really intent on saying, this is, you shouldn't buy that, you shouldn't eat this, and that is bad for you, and also that is bad for the economy, or that is bad for this, where they're really high and mighty, they don't necessarily understand where things come from.
No.
So they have these like I don't remember, Blue Apron sort of boxes, the Norwegian equivalent, and where like this chickpea died all on its own by its own volition. It was tired of life. I feel a lot of opposition towards that because I know what I do and I know what it takes with like engine repair and with knowing the weather and knowing the fishing and also cooperating with other people under really strenuous circumstances. And I know that some fishermen are terrible at their job like everyone else, but we try our absolute 100% best to give you good sustenance and
how can a fisherman be terrible,
ethical and fair?
How can a fisherman be terrible at their job? What does a bad fisherman look like? What do they do that's terrible?
A bad fisherman is in a way where he doesn't necessarily, if he has a crew, he doesn't necessarily consider them or that they're humans, where it's make a buck no matter what sort of weather it is. You're not taking safety into account. You could also be really bad at listening around because you need to know where the fish is. It's not like if it was easy to be a fisherman, any idiot could do it. You could just go and throw your nets out and you could catch fish. But you need to find the fish. And also when you get the fish, you need to treat it properly because you need to have respect for life. Because you're actually taking life.
Sure.
And then also you need to have respect for the customer because you need to give the best kind of product you can. And you could do that by, or not do that by leaving your nets out or your line out for far too long, that you have far too much fish and also the fish has died and it's not possible to bleed it. And when it's not bled right, you have bacterial growth in the fish that makes it deteriorate much faster.
I can tell the people who are listening.
Be a bad fish.
I can tell people who are listening who aren't that familiar with this. Bleeding the fish is so important. I'm talking like even if the difference between bleeding it right away and bleeding it maybe just an hour or two later, you will notice it in the taste of the fish. I do.
Yep.
So little things like that have to be taken into consideration. Also, they're big things actually that have to be taken into consideration. When you have your own boat, correct?
Yeah, but that is not my main source of income. My main source of income is from a bigger boat where I'm part of the crew.
Oh, okay.
And
I didn't know that.
I'm learning how to. Yeah, and I'm learning how to become a skipper on those big boats. And I'm taking classes and I'm educating myself.
Now, when you say big boats, when you say big boats, how big are we talking?
This is one of the coastal boats. This is not one of the trawlers that goes far out to sea and then block freezes everything and sends it to China. This is 23 meters, and I think that equates to about 72 feet.
70, yeah.
Yeah, the Norwegian foot is different from the American.
Yeah. American feet about 70 roughly. But that's the boat that you're working on. But the boat but the boat that you own, how big is that one?
That's 8 meters, and that's about 26, 27 Norwegian feet.
So what kind of classes are you taking, and where are you taking these classes?
My first class was sort of where you learn a variety of things with the international rules for pollutions of the sea, where you learn the Norwegian law, learn the rules for how you're supposed to act at sea. You learn about the different navigational instruments and like a variety of things, everything you might need to know. So I took that class. Thankfully, Corona has been bad in so many ways, but with a busy schedule, I was very happy that I could do it online.
Yeah.
And we had these sort of meetings where we had a week together solving puzzles and also looking at like how you calculate the stability of the boat and all those things. Yeah. So I did that. And now I need to do a radio class and a bigger security class where I need to learn how to like sew up my crew members if they get
like a medical class.
Yeah, a medical.
So are these things that you have to learn to be a skipper, or can you just have your own boat and do the best you can without those classes?
I don't need those classes for my boat, but for a bigger boat,
for the bigger ones,
I need that. So I think once I'm done with this, I'm allowed to drive and manage a boat that is about 500 gross tons. So that's quite big.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So
and then
no, go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead.
You get really stressed out once you're trying for the first time to go up to the dock and dock your boat when it's that big. It sounded like I had Tourette's the first time because I came in at the wrong angle and I go like shit. And thankfully my skipper was there going like, okay, breathe. So it was part docking the boat, and I've never had children, but I imagine that's what a Lamaze class is.
No, I can imagine that's a big piece of equipment. That is not an easy thing to have control of, and bad things can happen.
And also so many witnesses. I mean, come on.
Wow, yeah. Oh.
And they are all men, and they're probably going to be like tattletale women.
Do you feel like you have to? Do you feel like you have to be extra good to get, I don't know, respect from the men with whom you work, or do you feel like you have to be on your toes and make sure that you do things right because they're looking for those mistakes because you're a woman?
Well, thankfully that is not a static thing at all. There are some times where I've thought that, now I really have to step up my game, and now I have to excel, and I have to be like extra super good. And then it has turned out that it's more like a laissez-faire, whatever happens, que sera, sera attitude about it. And there are other times where I thought I'm just part of the crew and it really doesn't matter, where I really got told off. And I don't know if that was because I did a bad job or if it's because I'm a woman and then I sometimes try too hard. It's really hard to say, but I feel now that at least the boats where I've worked, I've felt that I've been accepted on my own terms for whatever capacity I have for working and learning new things, and also being there in emergencies, because we have those. We have a bunch of those.
I wanted to ask you about that. What's some of the exciting things or scary things that have happened out on the ocean?
I think what scared me the most, and I found that the more I know, the more scary I think things are.
Yeah.
Because in the beginning, it was just like, he thinks it's safe, so let's just do that then. I don't know anything about this. The first time I went out with the real boat, and was working with them, I was wondering, how do they get from the ladder down to the boat? Because we have quite a big difference between low tide and high tide.
Sure.
So sometimes you can't even see the boat under the dock because the tide is so low. And I was looking at the ladder going like, okay, I can go down the ladder, but how do I get from like the side of the boat to the bottom of the boat?
Yeah.
There are no stairs.
Yeah.
And then I took my suspenders and I walked and I looked as the other fishermen climbed down, and I saw what they did. And that has been my modus operandi ever since, where it's like monkey see, monkey do.
Yeah. And what did they do?
Yeah. They just stepped on other things that you wouldn't necessarily think that you could step on to get
improvised.
Down there.
They improvised. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I started to do the same. So it's been a learning experience ever since I begun.
Sure.
And you sort of touched on the subject of being a woman and how does that work? And when I started fishing, and I've been a woman all my life, a lot of media was really interested in this. Oh, this is so exotic, a woman fisherman. Oh, how does that work? And I remember I used to get really ticked off with the question.
Why?
It's just like, why do you ask me about that?
Why did that irritate you?
To begin with, I thought to begin with that it had something to do with feminism, and that I thought that I could do that job equally as well as a man. But then some years passed and I got safer and safer in my job, knowing more, learning more. But I found when I thought back on it, it was that when they kept asking me these questions, it was like a constant reminder that I didn't belong. And it was hard to answer questions saying that I belong when there was sort of like an implicit in the question that I didn't.
Well, but how about...
I didn't necessarily feel that I did because I was new and I was learning.
Well, but how about this? Because, I'm talking with you because I think it's very cool what you're doing, and I feel that you very much belong. And I want to try and put it out there that this thing that you're doing as a woman shouldn't be all that unusual.
No.
Right? Could that have been the angle that these media people were taking?
Not necessarily, because I remember one time there was this woman on the dock and she sounded like she was about to piss her pants because she saw a woman. And I felt like I was in a zoo when she was like, oh, a woman. Oh, it's fantastic. Oh, let me take your picture. Oh, it's amazing. Have they been kind to you? And she talked to me like I was a fucking idiot.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was more sort of that perspective, and maybe I also, seeing as I didn't necessarily feel that I belonged myself, and now... interesting. But now, it has been part of my life now for so long, and I've also tried different boats, fished different oceans on all sides of the planet, and not all sides, but both. And I've learned a lot more. I was in, and I wasn't allowed to in any way, but I was in Bristol Bay by Naknek, Alaska, and some
I heard about
that.
I heard about that, and that you were not allowed,
Point.
and that you were not allowed to be there. Someone told me that. Yeah.
No. Yeah, I wasn't. And I bought this really fancy ass camera so that if they came to check up on us, I would say like, I am here photographing because I think that my great grandfather was here. Because there was a lot.
Now, the reason that you weren't allowed to be there, was it because of your work status? You didn't have a work visa or green card?
Yeah.
That's what.
No, I didn't have a green card, and also I didn't have a fishing license.
Right.
And to get a fishing license, understandably, you have to be an American citizen.
So how did you get out? How did this happen? It's very interesting.
A friend of mine, he has been in Norway a bunch because he's a photographer, and he also owns, I think, 3 fishing licenses there. And I got to know him through another friend, and we were talking about fishing in Norway, which he's interested in, and we were talking about the fishing in Alaska. And then he says, like, hey, you should just come along and come fish with me. I really like that. And then we tried to look into doing it legally, but we figured that couldn't work at all, and I would probably be a pensioner before that happened. So we just risked it, and he bought a ticket for me. And a couple of days before I was leaving, I was trying to find my ticket, and I couldn't. And then turned out that he had bought a ticket for himself. So there was a lot of ruffle to have it changed into my name.
Yeah.
But I traveled as Mr. Lone. We couldn't change that. So traveled there as a man.
Cool.
Yeah.
So
I was fishing there for a month in the Pacific Salmon Run.
That's quite a ways from Norway. Where else have you been around the world to fish?
Oh no, it's just there. So it's just the other side of the world.
Other side of the world. Yeah, there you go. There you go. No, so getting back to your experiences out on a boat, what are some of the challenging situations that you've been in, dangerous situations that you've had to handle?
Once we were hit with, it's mostly weather related, I guess. And
it gets rough.
Even though my group of colleagues, they're not necessarily the first to believe in climate change, they will admit that weather has gotten worse, even though it's totally unrelated.
So that's totally unrelated. It's just gotten worse.
Yeah, it's just getting worse. I remember one time a couple of years ago, we were out fishing and the weather was supposed to turn bad later that day. And I'd asked my skipper, that was on the previous boat I worked, if we could just leave an hour earlier in the morning so that we were sure that we were on land and docked and everything before the weather hit.
Yeah.
And this was one of those polar low pressures, which is they're really hard to predict when they're going to hit and how hard. But he was like, no. And he hates getting up in the morning. So of course he said no. Usually we're done by that time, but we weren't, because of course, when you're planning for something else, fishing always will tell you that you should have no other plan than me. I am king.
Yeah.
And then as we were fishing, the storm hit, and the storm turned into a hurricane, and we were setting the nets, and this boat was smaller. This was about 12, 13 meters.
Oh, wow.
So we were out in a hurricane and we wanted to go to land, but seeing as we are on an archipelago, we have a lot of rocks and skerries that takes the weather, like shields us from the weather, but you have to go in between those when the weather is terrible.
Yeah.
And then we had an aluminum board on deck go loose, so all of a sudden we had 2 tons of fish going back and forth like this.
Wow.
As the weather was terrible, and you could hardly hear the engine because of the roar of the ocean.
Yeah. And
I said to him that we need to lock this somehow, because the fish was jumping out of the vats and then filling the deck of the boat. So the deck of the boat also was filling with water. And then you get less and less stable. And in that sort of situation, you want to be as stable as possible.
Sure.
And I have a tremor on my hands. I've had that since I was a child. It's not Parkinson's or anything like that. And if I get worked up, it gets worse.
Okay.
But I found one of those, we tried to tie it together, but then you have this like, what's it called? Where you take a thing in there and then you tighten it. What's it called in English? I forget.
A ratchet. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a ratchet thing. And I found one of those, and I had to climb in those vats going like back and forth, and you still heard the roar of the ocean. And I was trying to get that little piece into the ratchet, and then the vat came and blew it out of my hand, and then I had to run in front of them when the waves were going the other way to catch it again and then put it back in. And I think I had to try 3 times or something. and I was soaking with sweat from being working really hard with that ratchet, and also climbing in the fish vats and
also
not
being nervous.
crushed.
Also probably being nervous. You're going to have that nervous.
And also you have
sweat.
those cascades of sweat. And then I go into the wheelhouse and I look ahead, and we're approaching where it gets shallower and where it gets tighter and where we need to pass through to get home. And I also know that if you go out, or if a wave catches you in the wrong way or manner there, you will be sucked under. The whole boat will get sucked under and crushed. And then I tried to look ahead, and my skipper was completely quiet, and he doesn't get seasick either, but I could see that its face was really pale, and it was glistening with sweat.
Yeah.
And it was just the roar of the ocean and our breath, and I just couldn't watch. I'm going to watch and see if whatever I did with the ratchet is okay. Yeah. But after that, I really struggled. I was very, very angry for a long, long time, and it took a while for me to, when you get really scared, you get angry.
Okay.
Or I get angry. Yeah.
Interesting.
So I was angry
angry at what,
for
though?
a lot of days.
Angry at yourself for not handling the fear the way you wanted to, or
no. I was just angry at little things. I
see.
It was just little things, but it was that I wasn't dealing with my fear that made me angry. Then when I started just for myself, and when we were out fishing after that in way better weather, it could feel like my ribs were closing together and that I couldn't breathe. And I was afraid that
we're talking about PTSD. This is PTSD you're describing.
Is it?
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But I found a way to deal with it because I made up my own scale of fear.
Yeah.
And it wasn't 1 to 10. It was 1 to 16.
16.
And when and when I was scared, I would tell myself, okay, what kind of scared are you? Are you 7? Is it 15? Is it 5? And then it was quite simple. Once I'd put a number on it and just accepted, I am now 14 scared.
Okay.
It was easier to work through it.
Okay, yeah.
Well,
identifying and interpreting your fear goes a long way towards being able to live with it or control it. Absolutely.
What have you been afraid of?
Well, I'm a former police officer from the suburbs of Chicago, so I've been in some scary situations there. Absolutely. When you're dealing with, criminals, drug dealers, people who've killed, things like that. That's some scary stuff. Car chases, just like what you see on TV and stuff.
So you've done those?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I was a narcotics and gang detective. Plain clothes. So I was in it. I was in it. Yeah.
My favorite TV show ever is The Wire.
You know what? That is probably the best series I've ever seen. Yeah, I think I agree with you. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Quite the series. I mean, it was a good
close
picture.
To depicting?
I was going to say it's a good picture of what really goes on in the streets of most big cities. Yeah. Yeah.
And also the emptiness in the system and the will to pursue things is dictated not necessarily by the good of the people, but the good of actors further up in the system.
Exactly. Unfortunately. Yeah. And it's not like that everywhere, but in a lot of the big cities it is. That was quite a realistic picture of what goes on.
But were you on your own when you were doing these things, or did you have a partner?
Sometimes I was on my own, but for the most part I had a partner. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was different. I wasn't afraid during these things.
No.
I was younger. It was exciting, so adrenaline took over. But afterwards, when I thought through what I had just done, or what I had just seen. I'm also United States. I'm also a United States Marine, so I have my discipline from that. So that when there was a situation that would happen as a police officer, I would just go into training modus. Okay, how have I been taught to handle this situation? So there was no time for fear. There was no time for fear then, but afterwards, when thinking through what had happened, that internal debrief, then the fear would hit. That's when the fear hit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever get angry?
As a cop?
No, like after, when you were, it could be like the recycling was done wrong and then you would just lose your shit. Or
No, that never happened.
No?
It was always quite a cerebral and analytical process for me, that debrief thing after things like that happened. And I would sometimes regret the way I handled it or in the evaluation process, I could think, well, I should have done it this way instead. But there's never any, I was never the one to beat myself up for a decision I made. If the decision was wrong, okay, now it's time to analyze that and fix it so it doesn't happen again. And there's a certain amount of satisfaction that comes from that, even if I made a wrong decision. There's some satisfaction in recognizing that it was wrong and then doing something to fix it so it doesn't happen again.
That is the bravest, isn't it?
Oh, I don't know about that. That's my...
Yeah, but if you're willing to go into that matter and think it through and also not be infallible and then see some of the error.
Sure. Well, that's a thread, but that's a thread that's gone through my life from the time I was a kid, learning from my mother and my grandmother, and then into the U.S. Marines, the discipline of everything, and then being a cop, and then coming to Norway and having to adjust and, of course, reevaluate things as I went along. It's just a thread that's been through my life, that whole evaluation thing. I'm a thinker.
But when I can tell. But when you were going through these things and looking back and evaluating, did you sometimes do it together with coworkers, or was it more like no?
That whole and I was very specific in saying it was an internal debriefing that I went through. Because back in those days, at least where I worked, that the thing of having a professional debrief, maybe from a psychologist or something like that, it just didn't exist. It just wasn't an opportunity that was presented to me at that time. And of course, now I see how ridiculous that was. That should have been offered, but it wasn't. Yeah. So it was an internal debrief.
But wow, that sounds like it's like fishing, because they want to be so tough, right? They don't want to talk about being scared, although I know that a lot of them are scared.
Yeah.
And when I finally figured out that it was scary, I started talking about it. And for me, it got easier the more people I told. And also I could tell that the more confident I felt with that it was okay to be scared, the more the people I talked to opened up and also acknowledged their own fear.
Yeah, the floodgates are open.
Yeah, and I remember meeting some fishermen in the store. I was trying to pick out vegetables, and it was just a couple of days after, or maybe 3 days after it happened. And they asked me this really ridiculous question while they were also trying to be like, yeah, that was bad seamanship and it shouldn't have done like this, or you should. And then they sort of laughingly said, so were you scared? And then I just blew up in their face and said, of course I was scared. If not, I was a complete idiot.
Yeah.
It's like, if I didn't understand that this was dangerous, I would be a fucking fool. I should have no part.
See, I think a lot of people, especially men, and it is really such a coincidence that we're talking about this, because I was talking about this with a journalist today, about how a lot of people, and especially men, are so unwilling to admit that they are sad, or admit that they've done something wrong, or admit that they're scared. And I think that's too heavy of a burden to carry in a
All on your own.
in a healthy way. It's not healthy to carry that burden. You've got to let that burden go by talking about it, by admitting it, by addressing it, and then changing. And the change is very unlikely to happen if you're not even willing to talk about it. So when you have these guys who try to be so tough and act like they never get emotional, nothing upsets them, they're never scared, that man doesn't exist. That man does not exist. If you're walking around trying to be that guy, you're lying. Or trying to be that woman, you're lying to yourself, and you're lying to everyone who cares about you. So why do that? You know, I put it out there. And what this journalist was talking with me about is because I put it out there that I lost my son to a heroin overdose in 2019. Wow. And I don't think that is strange to put out there and to talk about. I mean, it's the reason why I started this podcast. And I don't think that's a strange thing to do. I think it's a beneficial thing to do. Selfishly or egoistically, I can say it helps me. But then the giving part of me says, well, maybe it will also help others. You know, by putting my story out there and not trying to hide it. So so these guys out there in Røst or wherever they are, these fishermen who are trying to act like they're not afraid,
or policemen,
in the US. Or policemen in the U.S. or here in Norway even. If you truly are not afraid, then you probably have a psychological issue that you need to address. Yeah. I mean, it's not. And it's not normal to carry that around and hide it, because the people who know you, you know, my friends, if I walked around and acted like I was just fine after losing my son to a heroin overdose, my friends would know that something wasn't right, because they know me. They know what I've been through, and they would see. I mean, to me, it's quite visible when someone is trying to hide their feelings. It's visible. People see it. And I wouldn't want to have the burden of trying to hide that from people. And it's a futile effort. You can't hide that.
But I remember once I heard this quote by Robert De Niro where he talked about acting.
Yeah.
And he said that when you're acting, you shouldn't be like too airy and overdoing it with the motion. That wasn't acting. If you were trying to be an actual human, you should try your very best to hide emotion, because that is what we do.
That's what people do. Yeah.
And I think then they also have the tendency to shine through either way what we're trying to do. But
it's just
when you're trying to act like Well,
yeah, no. I mean, it's just such it's an effort that demands so much energy. I don't understand why people engage in the effort to hide things like that. You could put your energy towards healing yourself. You could put your energy towards healing yourself.
But that also goes...
Yeah? Go ahead.
That goes back to having the words to say them. Because you can feel a lot of things, but it's really hard to identify them if you don't have the words.
That's true.
And when you don't have words, and when these are not ways or motions and currents inside of yourself that you're used to describing, and when you don't have adjectives or adverbs or have tried to think in sort of more like an abstract way, it is really hard to describe what emotion is.
But
you can have them all you want, but it's really hard to say what you're feeling if you don't have the vocabulary to translate it into.
But I'm a power lifter, so I put everything in the context of powerlifting, and I try to put that and apply it to life. So I will say that is a training issue. If you're not trained in expressing yourself, if you don't have the words, that means you're not trained in expressing yourself truly about how you feel. And that starts where? That starts from your childhood. So if you were a child who was raised in a home where people didn't communicate their true feelings, then you don't have the training in that. But the good thing about training is that you can start training anytime.
Exactly.
You can start training anytime. So it takes a certain amount of cognitive ability to first recognize that you need to train yourself to be a person who expresses themselves. So you need that cognitive side, but then you also need a little bit of humility, because to admit that you need training, that is to admit that you are deficient in something. So you have to have you have to be humble and have humility to do that. But if you have those two things, you can train yourself up to be a person who expresses themselves. I'll say that to any man. I'll say that to any man who claims that he doesn't have the words. You have the words, you just have to train yourself to use them.
Or you could read a book and learn new words. You could find words from other people who have tried to express themselves, and maybe that is
and
what
that's why I put my story out there, because it may be able to help somebody. Yep.
Yeah. Good.
I like you.
I like you too.
It seems like we think alike on these things, like we have some things in common. I knew it was going to be like this. I just knew it when Torsvara, your uncle, told me about you. I'm like, I need to speak to her, and I need to speak to her now. And I think it was like 3 minutes, and he came back with a message with your phone number and said she's waiting for your call. So I'm like, this was meant to be. I was meant to connect with you. Absolutely.
And then he was really interested to hear, did you say yes? When are you doing it? And I said, yeah, on Thursday. So what is he going to ask you? And I go like, I don't know.
You know what you tell him? You tell him watch the episode. Torsvara, watch the episode. Yeah. All questions will be answered.
And he's gonna.
Good.
And I said that I feel that it is going to be quite all right, because we had a little chat about the particulars of everything, and I feel safe, so you can just ask whatever. So
it's just a conversation. Yeah.
Thanks to my uncle.
And he's such a good guy. I've just recently gotten back in touch with him. He's one of the first people that I met and became friends with when I came here to Norway, and I started working as a teacher and a project leader at the school where he was a teacher. So I got to know him. Yeah, so I got to know him there way back in 2002 when I first came here. And but then when we moved up north, that was in 2006, I lost all contact with him, and then we came back south here to Drammen in 2014. But it was only maybe about a year and a half ago that I got in touch with him again through Facebook. And
but he's had a lot lot happen.
He sure has. Absolutely.
Wives and kids,
divorce
and whatever.
and all that stuff. And no, but I'm so glad that I got back in touch with him. He was also a good friend and good supporter within music. You know, him playing the bass, and I'm a vocalist and songwriter and all that stuff. So we used to work a little bit.
What kind of music do you play?
I play good music. Good. No, so
that's a genre I should look up.
Look
on
up
Spotify.
Good music. Yeah, look good music on Spotify. No, my music. I can send you.
You're going to be a sole contributor.
I can send you. I can send you a link when we're finished here. But my music. If we talk about my music, so far I've only put out 4 singles. I have a whole album project that I haven't released yet, but I've put out 4 singles. Simple acoustic songs. It's like these songs that I've put out, it's like a mix of like 70s singer-songwriter folk music with a touch of jazz, touch of soul, touch of R&B. If you melt all that together, you've got the 4 singles that I've put out so far. And then when
for the people who are listening on podcast and not watching the video thing, I will just have to note that once you start talking about your music, your shoulders start to move as if you're grooving you're talking about
okay.
it. Yeah,
okay.
they did.
Okay.
So it has soul and R&B and jazz, and then continue.
But when the album comes out, it's going to be more of a full ensemble sound, you know, with more bass and guitars and keyboards and all that stuff. A little bit more of a rock/funk element. So that's what's coming. But then the songs that I've written for other artists. I've written rock, I've written metal, I've written country. I wrote a whole country album for a friend of mine. So I've written all kinds of different I've written for and with Jonas Fjeld also.
Oh,
which
nice.
I'm extremely proud of. So yeah, So I kind of dip my toe in all different kinds of music genres, but my thing is kind of a melting pot of rock and funk and soul and R&B. It makes me move my shoulders a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
No, I was trying to be the proper host before that and sit up straight and be still and don't distract. But when you get me talking about myself and music and stuff, I gotta start moving a little bit.
Yeah, that's so nice to see. It seems that the music is coming out just in movement.
Well, I love music. I'm in a bit of a frustrating situation right now because part of the reason why I've been sitting so still is because I'm rather newly operated. I had a neck. You can see the scar here. I had a neck operation a few months ago, and then before that, I had a real serious shoulder operation. As you can see, I'm not really moving my left arm very much, so I'm kind of messed up, and that kind of got in the way. It's been in the way for the last 5 or 6 years of my music production because with a bad shoulder, it's so hard to play guitar or bass or keyboards and stuff. So that's why I just kind of put out these 4 singles, easy to perform. It's just acoustic guitar. I can do that, So that's this shoulder operation, and now the neck operation has really gotten in the way of stuff. Terrible
so
situation.
When do you think that you will be fully healed back on full capacity?
Well, the way it's looking now, I will never have full use of my arm. No. Again, it's gone. So the question will be, can I get to a point where I'm, if not pain-free, significantly less pain than what I have now? Because it's crippling pain. I'm in so much pain from this shoulder. Still, absolutely. Wow. I've had eight shoulder operations since 2015. Just mixing my Norwegian here. So I've had 8 shoulder operations since 2015, and I'm just in constant pain. It's terrible. I hate it. I hate it, and it gets in the way of things that I want to do. My powerlifting career, I've had to put that on hold since 2019. So everything is kind of on hold. It's
just about the same time as you lost your son. You lost something else that was important to you. Yeah. I'm familiar with loss, and I chuckle as I say it, but it's pretty sad. But I am familiar with loss. Yes, I am. Yeah, but that would have been maybe, if that was something that you enjoyed doing, that would maybe have been one of your outlets for.
Well, I will say this:
grief.
Music and competing in powerlifting is good therapy. Those 2 things have carried me through. Because it's been a great ride here in Norway since 2002. It's been great. I've had a lot of success. I've done a lot of interesting things and met some beautiful people. Yourself included. I'm so glad that I'm talking with you and I can call you a friend going forward.
Yeah.
So it's been a good experience, but at the same time, it's been an experience that's been mixed with a lot of loss, a lot of traumatic change and things like that. And the 2 things that have gotten me through is powerlifting and music. And now I can't do either effectively. But I have my podcast. I do have my podcast.
Yes, you do. And the reason I got quiet was because I started thinking about like musical instruments that you could learn where you wouldn't have to have the use of your shoulder or neck. And I haven't thought of any.
Well, the thing is, if you notice, I'm constantly just leaning on this arm because when that arm hangs, the weight of my arm hanging on my shoulder, it feels like it's just ripping it out of the socket. So I can sit and I can play acoustic guitar. I can do that, but 10 minutes at a time, 15 minutes maybe, before I have to put it down and rest my arm on the edge of my chair or on the desk or something. So it's just not. It's not. Yeah, it's not conducive.
It's not likely that you're going to make Bohemian Rhapsody 2. No 13-minute songs, just 10.
But I am going to. I was just talking to a good music friend of mine yesterday. I have committed to writing and I'm saving that album for when I am able to physically go out and perform and support that album. So in the meantime, I have committed to 2 more singles before October. That's my goal. Before October, I will write and record and put out 2 new singles. So I said it. For all of you people listening, I've said it. I'm committed to it. When October comes around, start asking me, where's the single?
Accountable.
Do it. Hold me accountable.
Wow.
And I don't know how I'm going to do that.
No, you don't?
I don't, because I'll have to do it in very short spurts, because I don't, like I said, I don't last very long, 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes, and I have to take a break. But I'll get it done.
Yeah.
You were going to say something, though?
So it is just the physical that is holding you back, not the general procrastination of creation. Oh
God, no, absolutely. I'm in an incredibly creative period right now, and you can see that in the podcast episodes that I release. If you saw my journal where I'm working on a book, I'm still writing songs. You know, I'm not in a situation where I can sit in the studio and be productive, but I can write, and I have my dictaphone on my phone, so I can hum in the melody and bass lines and things like that. So I'm also a stand-up comic. I can't do that now, also because of my shoulder, but I'm still writing material. So I'm incredibly creative right now, and it's in a sense, it's extremely frustrating to be in this creative phase. You know, when people are creative, they want to do something with it. So I'm being creative and I'm writing it and I'm getting it documented, but I can't put it out there. And that's extremely frustrating.
But have you always had this sort of confidence with what you're making?
Nobody said I was confident.
Oh no, you're just really good at faking it. Okay, that's it.
No, but where's the faking in, okay, if I write a song, and I put it out there, yeah, that demands a certain amount of confidence to actually take the step to put it out there. Or is the act of putting it out there the antidote to the extreme social anxiety that an artist suffers from? Which one is it? Is it confidence, or is it an antidote to fight against the anxiety? Is it the need to feel some sort of a victory in the midst of all that shyness and anxiety? See? So very often it gets interpreted, oh, this guy must be confident. He's putting his own music out there. He might be confident, but he must not be confident.
No.
It's not a given that is an act of confidence. It could also be a medicinal act to clean up.
That's very educating.
I think it is. I think it can be. Again, I put it out there. I talk about these things in the hopes that it might help somebody.
I've been asked to write a book, and I've been in the procrastinating, creating phase. So I've mastered the sourdough like anyone's business. I've a really clean bathroom, because you need to have that before you write.
Sure.
And I've figured out all sorts of ways to avoid doing what I've been asked to do, which I should think that I've been asked to not write a romantic novel. I've been asked to write a book about fishing and fishing policy.
Who asked you? A book publisher? Girl, you need to do it. Just write that book. But I can't clean my bathroom anymore before it turns into some sort of disease. So it's you know what you should do? It's going to happen. You know what you should do? You should open a blog. I don't know if you have a blog, do you? No. Okay, you should start a blog, and you should blog about all these things you do to avoid writing your book. And seriously, and you know what that'll do? Yeah. It'll be very interesting to read. I bet you could make it funny as well. It'll be therapeutic for you. It'll make you get in touch with your own psyche about why you're not taking the steps towards writing your book. And it will do why. And it will do what? It will also help somebody who is in a similar situation. Again, back to that whole thread about being of service to others. So, and it will also warm you up. The process of writing a blog, which may seem kind of inconsequential, it's going to warm you up to a very consequential endeavor, which is writing a novel.
Yeah. And also, I'm from a long line of our family creed is, if you don't try, you don't fail. Therefore, doing the trying is what is really hard for us. Yeah. We can also have trouble going to the post office to mail stuff. And I don't know if that's connected to our...
It is. It's connected.
Disengagement.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it probably is.
Yeah, but
I got my Christmas present for my birthday from my mom because she just couldn't make her way to the post office.
Oh, gosh. Okay. So that's what you inherited then.
It is, but I'm fighting against it. And like I told you when we were planning to do this, I planned to go out with my boat today.
That's
I
right. You
didn't
did
end up doing that. Yeah, but I didn't because I wound up actually writing last night. And I was writing until like 2 a.m. And that was a lot of fun.
How many words did you get down?
I didn't count the words, but I think I wound up around 10 pages.
You should, well, I'm not going to tell you what you should do, but one thing you can do is give yourself a set number of words that you want to write every day, or maybe an average for a week, X number of words per session. If it's only 1,000.
But I'm going to trick myself because when I did my bachelor's degree, I had a set number of words that I had to do, and it was in history. Uh-huh. So what I would do when I didn't have enough words, I would go in and put in all the names of all the people, not just their surname. So I would get more words. And if I repeated, and if I was, for instance, talking about Johann Sebastian Bach, every time I mentioned it, I wouldn't say Bach. I would say Johann Sebastian Bach. Because
if I
mentioned him enough, I would get more words.
There you go.
So I know that's a good idea, but I will trick myself. So it will be.
But that book, if you were to get that book out there, I can guarantee you it would be interesting because, there's a certain romantic aspect to being a fisherman. There's something that is appealing. Deadliest Catch. Why is it so popular? Why is that show so popular? It's because there's something romantic about fishing. You see a painting.
And it also makes sense.
Well, yeah, and you see a painting, like a classic painting of a classic fisherman type. Why does that look so cool? Why is there something that's so endearing and calming about that? Why are people attracted to that? So if you were to put a book out about your experiences from A to Z, if you were to do that,
but it's a lot easier to understand, even though you don't understand the specifics of it. How does it happen? When do you go out in the morning? Those sorts of things. It is one of our primary functions as humans. Once we settle down and we're in societies, you had the catching of food. That was the basic, and also everyone needs food.
Sure, you are living. You are in touch, literally in touch with a primal basic instincts that human have, and that fascinates the living daylights out of me. I just think it's so cool. You know what? Yeah, I'm coming to Røst. I'm going to get on a.
Yeah, you're welcome. Come on, just bring your crazy short wife and all the kids.
My crazy short wife. You remembered. I love it. She's crazy and she's short. Yes.
Maybe we could stack you. I have just one guest bedroom, but we'll figure it out. No worries. But
I shouldn't make fun of her too much. I'm not that tall either. I'm only 174 centimeters. That's not tall at all.
No,
so.
It's not.
No,
but it's back to fishing it and it being some sort of like primal function of humanity. For me, it would be really interesting to read about what does a hedge fund manager actually do, because it's beyond my comprehension.
Yeah.
But I don't think the general population has that sort of same romantic interest in that sort of way into society. We invent these jobs where people trade and money that doesn't exist. sort of, because it's very hard to understand.
Well, it's not natural. It's not natural.
No,
it has nothing to do with human instinct. But what you're doing does, and there's the difference. There's why your book would be interesting.
Kill is my motto. Kill!
Kill it. If it's flopping, kill it.
Oh, you have
gotta bleed those fish out.
I will kill you.
Gotta bleed those fish out. Gotta. Yeah, I think that if you put that book out, people would really jump all over it. I know I would.
Yeah. So I have one customer. Okay.
You have one person will read that book.
Yeah, good. I'll continue to get cracking. But then, I decided to write, and also I'm trying to repair my previous car to be able to sell it. And I keep repeating to people who ask me, oh, yeah, I love learning. Turns out I don't. I'm trying to learn about how a stereo system in a modern car works, because now it doesn't work.
Ah, okay.
Turns out I don't like learning at all. I hate it. I like things that I manage right away, but learning things, ugh.
I like learning what I want to learn. I don't like learning what I have to learn.
I think maybe you said what I thought. Yeah.
Go. I'm all in your head.
Yes, you are. What's with these headphones? Are you traveling in my mind?
Yeah. I didn't tell you there was a Mind Connect on this this link I sent you. Yeah.
It is really fancy, so I wouldn't be surprised. I wonder where you're going to take me next.
I wonder what is, if somebody were to just pack their bags, take a plane to wherever, and then a ferry out to Røst, and then approach a skipper, what's the chances of them getting a job on a boat? I mean, you did it, but is that normal?
3%.
3%.
No, it's not normal.
3%.
Yeah.
So what do you think you had? No, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And I think I'm allowing that 3% to be that it's during the cod fishing season, and that someone that works aboard their boat has either lost an arm or their mind, and that they need someone to crew. Because then one man's death and depravity is another man's lucky charm, where you get the opportunity.
Do you see a lot of guys getting hurt out there?
No, not really.
Okay.
I have been part of a fishing expedition where we were doing long lining up by the Russian border. So it takes about 10 hours by boat. And he got one of the hooks caught in his finger, and we couldn't get it out. So we had to go to land to have him go to the hospital to get it out. Yeah. Yeah. So that's the most dramatic thing I've ever seen. And so you say it is a really dangerous job, but all in all, with all the risk that we're taking and all the weather that we're out in, and how slippery things could get, both from oil spills and ice and just being tired, we are very, very, very rarely hurt.
That's good to hear. So you say there's a 3% chance of someone getting a job out there. So what did you have that put you into that 3%? There must have been something about you.
Location. So I was more some sort of infection that you get that you can't get rid of, because I was always here, because I lived here, and I was just nagging. And this was also at a point where we had more quotas that were here. So we had more boats. And now a lot of those quotas have been sold away from here. So all the boats that are here are completely manned and completely crewed. And as you get one of these positions, you're not very likely to let it go. Yeah. And that's why it's really hard. Also really hard for someone new that people don't know to come in and be able to take part in it.
I see. Yeah.
And the thing is that when you're a skipper on a boat, and let's say you have one person working for you, of course, you would like someone who's young and able, but you would also like someone who knows everything, who knows what to do with the ropes, who knows what to do with the anchor.
I would imagine they don't have much time to teach them all this stuff, so they've got to know it already.
No.
Yeah.
So it's way less strenuous for you as a person who's responsible for someone else to hire someone who actually knows what they're doing. But that also has a flip side. Like everything else, things have positives and negatives. And the flip side of that is that the pool of people that you're going to choose from is becoming smaller and smaller. Because if we all continue to use the same people who knows what is happening, you're not going to have a lot of recruitment. And then you're not going to be able to pass down that knowledge that you cannot necessarily find in a book, where you need to experience how the currents change, for instance, in one place 2 hours before the tide changes. And then you will have the fish hit like an hour and a half later than that. But other places you have the current change an hour, or like all these things that we know and learn. You need to know and learn from someone. Right. And then you could quite possibly end up with having a gap where you've just used the knowledgeable people and then you haven't taught new ones.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting. So I guess they kind of have to be
slim chance.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm not coming to this then to be a fisherman.
You can come visit.
I'll come visit. So how long until you have your own boat up and running? You're the skipper. You have your quota
on the big boat,
and you're doing your thing. Because you said you're not. Most of your time is spent in a crew. I guess a better question is how much of your time is spent on your own boat, the way it is now.
The way it is now, I have the luxury of having half the year off. I go, or this year, I'm going to have more time off than I'm actually working. I've fished for, I think it's 10 and a half weeks this year, this far. And then I'm going to do 10 more weeks this year on the boat where I'm crewing. Okay. And prices are lower this year because the way we're paid is that we're paid like a percentage of the total catch of the quota. And this is based on tariffs and rules that our union has agreed with the boat owner part of our union. Because my union is weird because it's both crew-based and owner-based.
That is strange.
But it is. And that's why it's maybe not as effective as of now. But that's another podcast for the really interested crowd. But my percentage when I worked on the last boat, the smaller one, it was just me and the skipper. So the boat took half of the catch, and then he took 25% and I took 25%.
Okay.
Yeah. So... like, for instance, I remember I used to have this blackboard thing in my kitchen. Yeah. And every day when I got home, I would draw up how much money I'd made that day. And I did that throughout the cod season.
Nice.
And I remember, like, wow, today I've earned 36,000 Norwegian kroners in a day. That's amazing. Yeah.
So you've had 10 weeks on your own boat, and it'll be roughly...
No, on the where I crew.
Oh, okay, 10 weeks where you crew. Gotcha. Okay.
And now it's open for my own fishing and learning and going to school. Yeah. The school part takes a lot of time, or has taken a lot of time. And and I'm also looking into continue. Did my uncle tell you that I've learned how to build harpsichords?
No, he did say you play guitar and piano and you sing, but he didn't say anything about harpsichord.
Yeah. No, but I went to Amsterdam a couple of years ago and worked with this Irish guy that builds harpsichords and learned how to build them. Wow. And his name is Thomas Power, and he's amazing.
Shout out to Thomas Power.
He is the best.
Wow.
And if it wasn't for Corona, I would for sure use some of my spare time to go there and build some more harpsichords. But I have in my shed that's down by the water, it's quite a big shed. I have my tools and also a half-built harpsichord that I really want to get cracking with.
How much does it cost to buy a new harpsichord?
If you want one that's built by him, I remember we sold one of the ones that I'd been helping to build for 24,000 euros. So that's about more or less the same in dollars, I guess.
Roughly, yeah. Wow, interesting. Yeah. There's a little side gig for you.
I wouldn't be able to sell any of mine for that much yet, but
don't sell yourself short. You just might. You never know.
Oh, but this is one of those builder kits that was released in the 70s, and I know the spruce is wrong in the soundboard.
Oh,
so,
okay. Yeah.
It's wrong.
Listen, I want to ask you, as we wind this up, I want to jump over to this documentary film that you were a part of, A Fish Out of Water. It's an Italian documentary film. Can you tell me how did you get involved in that?
People like you, they just ask. And they'd gotten my name from a guy that used to work for the Norwegian Seafood Council, one of those lobby commercial parties of the seafood industry that comes from out of here. He used to work in Italy, and they contacted him, and he told them about me. And they came here to make a story about stockfish, because that is what we make here, mostly. And stockfish is dried cod. And the cod is fished and dried between the months of January and March. And stockfish is a way of drying fish and conserving fish. And our biggest market for that is Italy, and they use it in all sorts of weird dishes. They even use it in like tiramisu and whatever ice cream they can make out of it. And drying fish has been done in the world, and also salting fish has been done to conserve fish. They found dried and salted fish in the pyramids in Egypt when they started excavating those. And seeing as the cod is a very seasonal fish, they hit in big amounts. So it's impossible for us to, or has been impossible for us to eat it all at the same time. And it makes no sense for a society by the coast to eat everything at once. You want to save some for later. So the way of conserving the fish gives it a very particular both taste and smell. And seeing as it's the national dish of Italy, for instance, isn't pizza or pasta. It's a dish made out of stockfish. And it's called bacalà di Vicentina. That's one of their national dishes. And it's made out of stockfish. And they wanted to come and make a film about stockfish. Where does it come from? What are the people behind it? And all that. And then they brought with them a Michelin chef that was sort of like the rock star of everything. And he went out with us and just did some fishing. It was out of season, so it was in the summer, so we caught mostly cold fish, but it was a lot of fun. And they got interested in, wow, what is it like to be a woman and be a fisherman?
Okay.
And then they asked me all sorts of questions, and I turned out to be a rather large part of that documentary. And I was invited to the premiere of this, like the Italian premiere.
I saw that on your Instagram. Yeah.
And I thought it would be just like, well, a documentary, and it's really a narrow topic. It's not going to be a lot of people. But I figured I'm in Amsterdam. It's a short plane ride away, and it will be fun. And I can stop by Venice for a day because I've never been. And then I went there, and the director people, they put me up in this really nice hotel in this mountain village, and they took me all around. And we were having that premiere the next day, and they were like, yeah, it's sold out. And I figured a Norwegian cinema theater has like maybe 300 seats. So I thought, wow, that's a lot of people. turned out it was 1,000 people.
Oh, wow.
And it was full.
Yes.
And to the day I die, I am going to remember, whenever I find that life is hard to deal with, I'm going to remember that one time I just stood up and 1,000 people applauded and lost their shit just because I exist.
That is pretty cool. That is pretty doggone cool. It is. Good for you.
And then they dubbed me into Italian. I was speaking in English in the documentary, but if you want anyone to watch anything in Italy, it has to be in Italian.
Yeah.
And then they had tried one woman, but they felt that she didn't get the cursing right.
Okay, didn't get the cursing right.
No, it sounded wrong. So they changed her into to another woman. And they were so worried, will you like her? And then once we were done and we headed to a bar to celebrate and everything, they were like, did you like the voice? And I could assure them that, yes, can I have her number? I would like to have her speak for me more frequently.
I love it. I have to ask,
yeah, so that was an experience.
How often do you get to speak English? Because your English is better than most Norwegians that I come into contact with.
I haven't spoken English now for a year, maybe.
Wow. Well, you're pretty good at it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I was worried that I wouldn't find the right words, and I haven't necessarily utilized my entire vocabulary, but I think I'm understood at least.
I think you're doing great. I think you're doing great.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, I have two things I'd like for you to do for me before we round this episode off. First, I'm going to ask you, or I'm gonna say something, and then I want you to fill in the blank in one sentence. Okay? And
I'm ready.
You ready? Okay. Lone Nikolaisen is
happy. I would say happy. She is happy.
She is happy. You look happy. You sound happy. You have much reason to be happy. Okay. Yeah?
Yeah.
And the last thing I want to ask you to do is, can you say something that my viewers and listeners can take with them for the next day or two or week or month that they can hold on to for inspiration or motivation? Can you say anything that would do that for them?
I would say not necessarily that. Well, it goes back to that take care of yourself. But when I haven't been able to take care of myself, I found that saying to be provoking even. So what I would like to say is stop being so goddamn hard on yourself. It will be okay. It's enough. So, yeah.
There you go.
And when you have that attitude, you could do whatever or nothing, and that's fine.
That is the truth. Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes to be normal and do nothing is something that gives more allowances towards yourself, and then you can feel more content.
Sure. Words of wisdom, everybody. Words of wisdom from Lone Nikolaisen. You know,
and we hardly talked about fishing.
Yeah, but you know what? That just means that we're going to have to come back and do this again.
Turns out maybe you should come here.
Turns out I should come there. You know, I've been fascinated by Røst. You know, nothing about the Røst that comes on the news is boring. It's always something interesting. So up through the years of me being here, these things that come on the news or it's written in newspapers or something, and it just fascinates me. I'm a nature lover, and all things north are better for me. So to come up to Røst would be a delight for me. I'm going to have to do that.
We could do a podcast in my living room.
We could do a podcast.
You could be there.
You know what? Because this microphone isn't heavy, I just stuff all my equipment in a suitcase and off I go to Røst.
And I can hold your shoulder.
You could hold my shoulder. See, this can be done. I'm
really strong.
This can be done. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, listen, I want to thank you.
We made a plan, Stan.
I want to thank you for doing this. And you're right, we didn't get to talk that much about fishing, but But I think that's a testament to the fact that you are so much more than just this person on a fishing boat. You're so interesting. It's fun to talk with you. You know, you are much more than just one podcast episode. So we're going to have to do this again.
Thank you.
I'm going to have to come up to Røst and visit you, and you have to look me up if you're ever in this part of Norway. Come check me out. But again, thank you so much for doing this. And I call you friend. I have a friend on Røst now.
Yes, you do. And I have a friend in Drammen.
There you go. You have a friend in Drammen.
Yeah.
Lone Nikolaisen, everybody. Bye now.